Look, as a manager of people, as an employer, as an entrepreneur, and as even an investor in startups, I can tell you the most important thing for your business is the quality of the people you hire. The best part is that great candidates are already on LinkedIn. Employees hired through LinkedIn are 30% more likely to stick around for at least a year compared to those hired through the leading competitor. And I will tell you that the great thing about LinkedIn is that you're not just looking at random people. You're able to see the people who your friends and trusted peers and colleagues, who they trust and who they've hired in the past and who they recommend. And hiring doesn't have to be complicated. Realistically, when you have a business to run, you don't want to spend hours on hiring. You want to hire the right person as quickly as possible. That's why LinkedIn Jobs AI Assistant suggests immediately 25 great fit candidates daily so you can invite them to apply and keep things moving. Hire right the first time. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/Altucher, then promote it to use LinkedIn Jobs' new AI assistant, making it easier and faster to find the top candidates. That's linkedin.com/Altucher. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
Today on The James Altucher Show.
So you worked for a secret government program, and then you had to go ask the secret government program to be able to speak publicly. And I'm supposed to believe that the secret government program said, oh yeah, you can talk about the secret government program. If large organizations lie to you about simple questions, you're free to believe anything you want. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm not a trained observer, but I think I could successfully distinguish a mushroom cloud from a flying saucer. Do I think that aliens are probably real? Yeah, 85% I'll believe. But 15% of me is going like, okay, this could be a giant psyop, or maybe there's something about the human brain that we don't understand.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is The James Altucher Show.
Are UFOs real or not? Are aliens real or not? Well, for pretty much the past 80 years, there have been government whistleblowers who have claimed very credibly that the government has, taken over or found UFOs. They have alien bodies, all this stuff. So I wanted to speak about this with Kent Heckenlively, who wrote the book Catastrophic Disclosure, The Deep State, Aliens, and the Truth, because I wanted to find out the truth. And I want you guys to help me figure out if we found it or not. So let's find out together. So, it's interesting. I'm similar to you in that probably every year I write a book. Like you have 20 books out there, I have 25 books out there, but
Okay.
Yours are more substantial than mine. So I give you a lot of credit.
Don't sell yourself short.
But this latest one is fascinating. Catastrophic Disclosure, The Deep State, Aliens, and the Truth. Now, before we get into the book and some of the really interesting kind of back and forth you have with the different government officials and different stories from Congress to the federal government and all these whistleblowers and so on, what's your personal belief on UFOs?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I'd have to say I've always had something of a recreational interest in UFOs, but I can't say that I've ever seen anything. I don't have any missing time, nothing weird. I don't think I've ever been probed without my permission. But I think I'm like a lot of people, which is you start talking about this topic among your friends, and inevitably, like every fifth or sixth person will say, hey, I had an experience. So it was kind of weird. Yeah. And so, it was kind of like my longtime editor, Max Swafford, lives in the hill country of Texas. And so I told him, oh, yeah, I'm starting this UFO book. And then he proceeds to tell me 2 UFO experiences that he had, with a bunch of guys out hunting. And it's just like time and again, those of us who have not seen anything, there are people that we respect and have known for a long time who will tell us the stories that they may not have told other people. So,
And what did he tell you, and what was your reaction?
well, he told me about seeing a large triangular craft coming out of a cloud, and it was observed by a number of his buddies for a good 10, 15 minutes.
Wow.
And then it went away. And, I think a lot of us who haven't seen something like that, we've had the experience of people that we know and trust, telling us stories like that. So they seem to believe it. And, who knows? Maybe every 10,000 hours, our brain encounters a glitch and we see something like UFOs or aliens or ghosts. But it doesn't seem these people are lying.
And like when you heard the story, what was your reaction internally? Like, did you what other explanations were you trying to come up with in your brain for what he could have been seeing?
Well, there's always the idea that you're just misidentifying something, or people have heard about reverse engineered craft. Maybe it's some secret government technology. And, you just don't know. I mean, I wasn't there. And this is my 20th book. As we said, it's the first time I've ever taken a walk on the wild side. I've never done anything supernatural. My books have covered corruption in science, medicine, big tech, the media. My last book, I went after the CIA. I paired up with a former CIA officer, whistleblower. And so, you just keep hearing these stories. And what really got me interested in doing this story is that in the summer of 2023, there were hearings in front of Congress. And my previous books had covered Congress. And I knew that before you can testify in front of Congress, they vet you pretty closely. So when I heard David Grusch and Ryan Graves and David Fravor talking about reverse engineered craft, talking about military pilots, seeing things that they couldn't explain, I said to myself, there's a story here. And, what I usually do in my books is I'm sort of the everyman who's just curious. And I usually pair up with an acknowledged expert in the field so I don't get things too wrong. And, in this instance, I happen to know one of the significant figures in the UFO field, Michael Mazzola, who's probably one of the top UFO documentary filmmakers. And I called him up and I said, Michael, what's going on with these UFO hearings? And he said, well, here's what we're hearing that the spooks are saying behind the scenes. The spooks behind the scenes are saying they're interested in what's called controlled disclosure, but they fear this thing that they call catastrophic disclosure. Now, as a writer, I love words. So when I heard that expression, catastrophic disclosure, it was just delicious to me. And I thought, that's a string I have to pull. And you mentioned that I write a lot of books. And usually I can pound out a book in 4 to 5 months because I really stay focused on it. This one took me 2 years because I wanted to get it right. I wanted to talk to the leading figures in the field. And, then I wanted to have the time to reflect on what they said and whether I found what they said to be credible, or, maybe I'm going to have my own independent interpretations of the evidence.
It's interesting because like everyone, like probably you, when I was a kid, I read all these books about UFOs and the possibility of UFOs, starting with, and you talk about all these UFO sightings in the late 40s after World War II and the first atomic explosion. And, it's a lot of stuff that can't be explained. But in recent years, the two things that really piqued my interest were those 2023 congressional hearings with David Grusch. He was like someone who worked in the government and could be a legit whistleblower based on his positions in the government and who he interacted with and so on. And then there was, obviously YouTube. You see these videos from pilots. Of course, the videos could be manipulated, but these are like, government videos in some cases where something's shooting around really fast, going in all sorts of crazy directions. It appears to be not some natural phenomena, and who knows? So, first, I know you focused a lot on David Grusch, so I wanted to ask you about him. Like, maybe describe him and his story and what he claims he heard and saw.
Yeah, so approximately, I think, 16 years with the Air Force, and then he was with the Air Force Intelligence. And, it's kind of interesting. And that one of the things that a number of the UFO people are skeptical about is these military whistleblowers, because they say, you know, puzzle me this. So you worked for a secret government program, and then you had to go ask the secret government program to be able to speak publicly. And I'm supposed to believe that the secret government program said, oh, yeah, you can talk about the secret government program. And, that is something that I confront in this, which is, I watched David Grusch's testimony, and I'm like, God, I'm just so puzzled by this because, you know, he seems like he believes what he's saying, but sometimes the things that he says with my lawyer's ear, when he says thing, I'm testifying as to what I've been told. I'm thinking, well, that's a curious construction of language. What does that mean exactly? That means he's relying on what other people have told him. And so, with this book, what I really wanted to do is I guess the reason I wrote this book is I didn't understand the UFO issue because there's so many stories out there. And as a writer, I like a narrative. I like to understand what the heck is going on here. Don't just give me a whole bunch of isolated incidents. Put it in a narrative for me. And so that's why, I spoke to the leading figures in the UFO field, people like Dr. Stephen Greer, people like constitutional lawyer Danny Sheehan, who's probably one of the smartest men I've ever met, independent journalist Michael Schellenberger. And then I have struck up a really nice relationship with Congressman Eric Burleson, who's one of the leaders on the task force. And, I'm asking them all the questions that I think the audience wants to know. And Burleson is a perfect example. He's a skeptic on aliens, but what he's not a skeptic on is saying the intelligence agencies aren't playing it straight with us. And it makes the Congress people, like Tim Burchett, like Anna Paulina Luna, furious because here they believe that they are the representatives of our government, and they're asking the intelligence and military people, tell us what you're doing. And, they're not satisfied with the answers they've been getting. And so more than the stories, the cover-ups interest me because, I'm a huge fan of Scott Adams, the Dilbert guy and the political commentator. And, one of his rules is that if large organizations lie to you about simple questions, you're free to believe anything you want, okay? You're free to assume the worst. And so I think that's one of the things that got, my lawyer's brain all excited is when these agencies put out absolute garbage information and expect us to believe it. Now, perfect example is I do a chapter on the March 2024 Arrow historical UFO report. And so I'm reading through this and you look at it in the news and it's like, oh, the government has finally slammed the door on UFOs. And I look through it and they say, well, the government has investigated UFOs 25 times. And I just think to myself, 25 times? You've investigated this? Now, if my wife investigated me 25 times to see if I was faithful, I would conclude that she believed I was unfaithful.
Right.
Okay? So, and then, so there are these 25 crazy investigations. Has the government investigated leprechauns 25 times? I don't think so. Okay? Because probably they did one or two investigations and they decided there's no leprechauns. I'm sorry, it's just on the Lucky Charms box. But then I looked to the things like they gave 26 different explanations for why otherwise normal, credible people may have believed they saw UFOs. Number one was the Manhattan Project. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm not a trained observer, but I think I could successfully distinguish a mushroom cloud from a flying saucer. So why are you giving me the Manhattan Project as number one? And then they do other crazy things, like they say, well, during the 1960s, we experimented with a flying saucer car, but it never got more than 3 feet off the ground.
Hmm.
I'm thinking to myself, okay, So how does that explain a single UFO sighting?
Also, when you hear something like that, okay, right now we're technologically so much more sophisticated than the 1960s. So we would know, like, I've never seen a flying car that just flies 3 feet above the ground. Like, a lot of these explanations just don't hold up in the face of future science. Science that was the future of the 60s, like the science of now.
Yeah. So I'm kind of wondering, well, why is this the official report and why does it suck so much?
Yeah. So again, though, like, and I'm sorry, I'm skipping to David Grusch because I do want to talk about like the World War II stuff. But that was the one where I was watching it and I'm thinking, is he doesn't look insane. He's worked for the Air Force. He says he spoke to people who basically said, we are holding on to, alien bodies and alien aircraft. And so what's the story? Like, so he never saw these objects, though he was told, and he did work in the department where one would be told. So there's room for disbelief there. But like, what was his story?
Yeah, so he was Air Force intelligence. So he does have those credentials. He was given to the ARROW, which the All Domain Anomalous Aerial Phenomenon division, which was investigating UFOs. So he had the position investigating UFOs, and that was his job. So as they went through the crazy vetting of him, it all came back. Yes, he is exactly who he says he is. And so, I found him to be credible. And yet, I also kind of wondered, and this is what Congressman Eric Burlison wondered about. He was like, okay, I'm tired of having all these people who are secondhand witnesses, who were told something by somebody else. And so that's kind of why the most recent hearing had a number of people like Dylan Borland, who directly observed UFOs. So Congress has really done their job in terms of trying to get the information from the military and intelligence agencies. But behind the scenes, they're really angry because a lot of the information they've requested has not been provided to them in good faith. And so Congress is in this weird position of saying, we're supposed to be in charge of the country, but we don't feel we are.
So describe Dylan Borland. Like, what made Dylan credible and what happened there?
Dylan Borland was a military police officer at, I believe, 29 Palms. And, he had seen a large craft taken off from the NASA hangar, a large triangular craft. I believe he'd had two experiences with triangular crafts. And, there's this entire question of whether there has been a program of reverse engineering. And the question is that a lot of these UFO people ask and claim is that we can do a pretty good job spoofing UFOs. So maybe some of these craft, like, the drone sightings in New Jersey were very interesting to me because I found myself going, what's going on with that? A lot of people are seeing these things and the government doesn't seem to be giving good explanations. Is this military contractors showing off their wares? Because it seemed like they really didn't mind being seen. And I didn't know what that was all about. And I still don't know.
So, okay, so he saw a triangular craft lifting off from, did he identify which hangar, like, and who was kind of the owner of that hangar?
Yeah, he said it was near the NASA hangar.
And, NASA hasn't really made rockets for the U.S. for a long time, right? So NASA's more of just of an administrative agency now, from what I understand. So how credible do you think his sightings are?
Well, here's what's really interesting. And so that ARROW report that I made fun of talked about the whistleblowers. The thing that I found really interesting was this ARROW report, which was supposed to be about the historical UFO program, looked specifically at a number of the whistleblowers who had appeared on the scene by 2024. And in every instance, they said, these are real people. They have identified real programs of the United States government. They have correctly identified personnel working for those programs, the only mistake they made is they aren't alien. I'm like, okay, that's cutting it pretty close, buddy.
What about the people they identify who, like Grusch, for instance, he hadn't seen any UFOs, but he was told by people working for the government that there are these spacecraft or alien craft and there are alien bodies. Why couldn't Congress then talk to who he talked to?
It's a great question. So, what I have been told happened with Grusch is for a period of about 14 months afterwards, Congress was saying, we need to get David Grusch into a skiff. In order to get Grusch into a skiff,
What's a skiff?
A secure communication information facility. So that's supposedly where the secrets can be told. But Congress had to apply to his superiors to say, can David go into the secure communication information facility in order to tell us these things? And for 14 months, they said no, or they didn't respond. And so Congress was just really upset because Congress has no enforcement mechanism against these agencies and bureaucracies. And that seems to be the problem, which is Congress says these things, they're told, oh yeah, you'll get access, and then it doesn't happen.
Okay, so like Grusch's superiors, for instance, could they be forced to testify?
That is a great question. One of the problems is I'm a lawyer, so maybe I'm familiar with stupid rules. And I just see this as more stupid rules stuff. So what Grusch would say is, I can't give you that name until I'm in a skiff and it has been cleared. So for those 14 months, Grusch is saying, I can't tell you who the gatekeeper is until I'm in a skiff. Oh, well, can we get you in a skiff? Well, we have to wait for my bosses to say okay. So Congress, and it's kind of hilarious talking to the scenes behind these congressmen, which is, and they'll say, we don't even know what to ask. Like they'll say, oh, there's a secret program. Oh, okay. So I'll ask them about it. No, but you have to know the exact name of the program in order to get these people to talk about it, because that's the way they compartmentalize the information. And they'll say, oh, well, what's the exact name of the program that I can ask them about? Well, I can't tell you about that until I'm in a skiff. And so it goes round and round.
Yeah. And then, and this is related to, like, again, what I think are the credible whistleblowers out there. These aren't even whistleblowers, but like these pilots in some of these videos, when I saw them, again, I guess I don't know, in retrospect, I don't know if they were manipulated or whatever, but they were presented as real videos from, fighter jet pilots and stuff. And they seem to be seeing, and even, the government at that time said, yeah, we've seen unexplained aerial phenomena, UAPs, which is like the new acronym for UFOs. We've seen these things. They're not aliens. We've just seen UAPs. And that's kind of where they go for it. And do you know these videos I'm talking about? Like, you refer to them.
Yeah. So I got a couple things to say. One of the things that's really interesting in Dylan Borland's testimony in September that I found very fascinating is he says, you have to understand how the government is getting away with saying these things are not alien. And like I said, I fall back on my lawyer's background. It's all about definitions, right? And how you define things. Dylan Borland testified that in their mind, the way they're getting away with saying it's not alien is they say, well, in order to determine scientifically that something is alien, we would have to go to that planet, observe the beings in their natural environment, then come back and then compare it to what we have. So they could literally have an alien body sitting there and they could say, well, we've never been to the home planet of this creature, so we can't say it's an alien.
But it's like you say.
So
It's like you say in the book, though. You quote one scientist who says, "Show me a metal alloy, and I could tell you if it originates from this Earth or not. Like if it's a naturally occurring, element that could originate from the Earth, or even if it comes from an asteroid." So there is science. Do you think any of that science, like, is any science in the past 80 years, has any actual science been revealed that might suggest something is alien, other than like visual people seeing stuff?
one of the most interesting things that we end the book with is these so-called Peruvian alien mummies. These are bodies that are over 1,700 years old. They're very strange. They've got 3 fingers, 3 toes. They seem to be hybrid creatures. And there are CAT scans of them, x-rays. And I spent a lot of time talking to the Latin American scientists who have examined them. They say these were real creatures. You see the wear and tear on the joints. You see the internal organs. 1 or 2 of them appears to be pregnant. They have done DNA testing on them. The world's greatest DNA company, Colossal Bioscience, is actually negotiating with the Peruvian government to try and do their own testing on it. But the preliminary DNA testing, which has been done, has shown that these creatures have about 70% DNA from Earth, with the majority of it being human, but not from South America. So the Peruvian mummies have DNA from humans in Southeast Asia, as well as DNA from 2 different species of chimpanzee, which are located in Africa. And then it's got about 30% DNA, which is not known to be on Earth.
And how
And
old were the
so,
mummies, do you think?
over 1,700 years old.
So
I just saw a recent one that one of them appears to be about 6,000 years old. They just did some testing on it. I haven't been able to get into the details of that, but they show it's got bone, cartilage, skin, all that other sort of stuff, that it was a real creature. It's not some paper mache thing that was, put together by some sidewalk artist.
and could it be that they're just, other forms of hominid, kind of like how Neanderthals are not Homo sapiens and Homo erectus is different from Homo sapiens and so on? Could it be another Homo something?
That's a great question. And the scientists that I spoke to and interviewed were very clear on this, saying, look, these things look very unusual. They look hominid, but not human. And it could be some unknown species of human, but when you look at the genetics are just weird. I mean, chimpanzees are 99% us, and these things only appear to be about 70% us. And, when it looks like these are genetically manipulated beings, and I'm hopeful that the Peruvian government will let Colossal Bioscience, who just de-extincted the dire wolf, actually do these experiments, because I want to know what the best scientific testing says about these creatures.
Take a quick break. If you like this episode, I'd really, really appreciate it. It means so much to me. Please share it with your friends and subscribe to the podcast. Email me at altucher@gmail.com and tell me why you subscribed. Thanks. So I have started many companies. Some did well, some did not do as well. I've also run many companies. I've advised many companies, and I've been involved in all aspects of the hiring process, whether sometimes I would have to hire a CEO, but sometimes software developer, sometimes designer, sometimes head of sales or business development. I've been involved in basically every aspect of running a business, and hiring is maybe the most important thing you could do when you start a business. So I'm going to give you one piece of advice, and it's related to what I'm talking about here. I used to think I was frugal because I would try to find employees as cheaply as possible, someone young, just starting out, whatever. But what I've learned is you do so much better as a business finding the best person in your field. If you want a head of sales, find the best head of sales. If you want a software developer, hire the best software developer. It ultimately will save you money, but it'll also save you so much time, so much aggravation, so much anxiety. These are all things you need to preserve. It's really important to hire correctly. When you're running a business, your mind is on your business 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's the problem with being an entrepreneur is you never leave the work at the office. So when you're hiring, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. I have found that a great hiring partner is LinkedIn Jobs. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, get qualified candidates that you can manage all in one place. And I find this is such a great platform to find people for your job because millions of people are on LinkedIn, millions of qualified people. Here's how it works. You post your job. LinkedIn's new feature helps you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people. Post your job for free or you pay to promote it. Promoted jobs get 3 times more qualified candidates. You get qualified candidates. At the end of the day, this is the most important thing to your business is the quality of those candidates. Based on LinkedIn data, 72% of small and medium businesses using LinkedIn say that LinkedIn helps them find high quality candidates. That's good information. You share with your network. So when you're on LinkedIn, your whole business network knows you're hiring. So find out now why more than 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring today. Find your next great hire on LinkedIn. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/Altucher. That's linkedin.com/Altucher to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Look, as a manager of people, as an employer, as an entrepreneur, and as even an investor in startups, I can tell you the most important thing for your business is the quality of the people you hire. The best part is that great candidates are already on LinkedIn. Employees hired through LinkedIn are 30% more likely to stick around for at least a year compared to those hired through the leading competitor. And I will tell you that the great thing about LinkedIn is that you're not just looking at random people. You're able to see the people who your friends and trusted peers and colleagues, who they trust and who they've hired in the past and who they recommend. And hiring doesn't have to be complicated. Realistically, when you have a business to run, you don't want to spend hours on hiring. You want to hire the right person as quickly as possible. That's why LinkedIn Jobs AI Assistant suggests immediately 25 great fit candidates daily so you can invite them to apply and keep things moving. Hire right the first time. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/Altucher, then promote it to use LinkedIn Jobs' new AI assistant, making it easier and faster to find the top candidates. That's linkedin.com/Altucher. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
At Arizona State University, we've made online education better, smarter, and more personalized so you can go further in your aspiring field.
I decided to pursue medicine once I realized that ASU did have the online program for biological sciences. You're still required to learn the same curriculum. You're still being tested on the same content that anyone would be tested on in person. The comprehensiveness of the program prepared me so well for medical school.
Explore over 350 plus programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Yeah. Where are these bodies right now?
Well, there's some at the University of Mexico in Mexico City, and there's some at the University of Ica in Peru. That's ICA.
And can you personally go visit them?
Yeah, I was actually invited to go down this summer to Mexico City to look at them as well as the Boogosphere, but I had some family obligations. But good old Congressman Eric Burleson, I got to go on that. So we've got pictures of the good old skeptical congressman looking at a big alien hand, and it's pretty funny.
And so they think it's real at the universities.
Yes, they do. And one of the things I should also mention is that there is a American forensic expert who has gone to Peru and to Mexico City and to look at these, and he is convinced also that these things are real.
So what other explanation other than alien could there be? And by the way, 70% not like us is a very strange thing because...
No, 70% like us, 30% not like us.
Right. So, okay, that I mean that actually. So bananas are 70% like us 30% not like us. So there is like, you have to go really far and you're still 70% like humans because you're organic and you're alive just like a banana is. So most of the essence of being alive is just being 70% like a human. Like you say, chimpanzees and basically every other mammal is like in the 90 to 99% category of being like us. And
Yeah.
to only be 70% like us, that means they're really, really different, like a banana.
Everything about this seems bananas, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is very strange, and I'm not a geneticist, but when you're talking to a geneticist, and they'll go, well, a fly is like 70%, 65% us, and I'm like, oh my god. So if these were unknown hominids, I would expect the DNA testing to show them much closer to us,
Right.
and there are groups of people who got weird hand mutations and it persists, but nothing like this. I mean, we've got some pictures in the book of x-rays of 3 tridactyl hands, and they've got extra phalanges on it, and it's really weird. And like I say, I've never seen anything out in the wild, but a lot of people have, and what I try to do is I try to gather all the evidence. I try to let everybody speak for themselves. I don't want to cut anybody off, and so I let them have their say, and then I chime in with my thoughts on it, and let the readers make up their mind.
Right. So like, I really wrestle with the David Grusch one and all of these credible witnesses, plus the sheer mass of evidence. Like you said, even your friends that you could trust and you believe they've seen a UFO. But here's one issue, and this is like the argument I always use for people who say 9/11 is a conspiracy, is that there's almost like a mathematical formula in that so many people have to hold a secret that it's almost mathematically impossible for this many people to hold a secret in order for something to be true. So like 9/11, you would need thousands of people to keep a secret if that was a true, American-led conspiracy, like a false flag operation or whatever that many people claim. So thousands of people would have to keep a secret, which is just impossible. Like it's never been historically, the odds would be like 1 in a trillion. So how many people would have to have kept a secret about space? The US government has spacecraft that they've reverse engineered. How many people would have to keep that secret over the past 80 years for that to be true?
Well, here's a great answer to that, which I don't know if it's true, but it's an interesting answer. So I did a lot of interviewing of Dr. Stephen Greer. And so Greer has over 700 whistleblower accounts of people he says who say they worked in the federal government and saw these craft. They may have been service members, they may have been members of the intelligence community. And the story that Greer tells is that in the 90s, as he was investigating this, and he was trying to figure out a framework to get to disclosure, he realized that what he needed to do was send a letter to all the defense and intelligence agencies known as an unless otherwise directed letter. And so his framing of the issue is that these programs, since they're spending our money, are under congressional oversight. And if they do not submit to congressional oversight, they are by definition unconstitutional. And so the letter he sent out made that argument. And he said, now that I have let you know that this is true, then, or I've made this allegation, you as the federal government need to tell me why I'm wrong. You need to send me a letter directing me that I am mistaken. And if you do not send me that letter, then I am free to gather information from these whistleblowers. And so they never responded to him. So, what somebody like Dr. Greer would say is, well, I have over 700 accounts of whistleblowers from the federal government, and people won't look at it. It's a little bit like the Galileo argument that I heard, which is that when Galileo was making his claims that the Earth went around the sun and all of these other bodies in the heavens were other stars or planets, he invited the Catholic bishops to his observatory at night so they could peer through his telescope and see the moons of Jupiter, for example, or the curvature of the planet Mars, or the craters on the moon. And the Catholic bishops never went there. So the question is, when something sounds crazy to the majority of the people, will the vast majority of people make the effort to investigate something which goes against their belief system? And so I don't know if that's a great answer.
No, but what you're
but
saying,
it seems like a plausible one.
what you're saying is there were, in fact, hundreds of people that didn't keep a secret and were whistleblowers to Stephen Greer, and that the government basically has refused to acknowledge or even mention anything about it. They just ignore. Their best defense is ignorance. Now, the Catholic bishops is a little bit of a different example because they had nothing to prove. They were relying on the faith of their followers, whereas Galileo actually could scientifically prove something. So in fact, the Catholic bishops did what the government did, which is just ignore it. And I'm just wondering, of the 700 whistleblowers, did they? I mean, what? It's 80 years of speculation about UFOs. What would have made society believe once and for all that UFOs exist? And has that evidence been presented and poo-pooed in some way by the government? Like, what's the best case now we have that UFOs and even aliens are real? The proven one is interesting.
Yeah. And there's another really interesting recent article about a scientist. I know her first name is Beatriz, and I want to say like Villarosa. And what she did was she looked at pictures from telescopes prior to Sputnik going up, and seeing, could there be flashes of light which are not meteors but might be extraterrestrial craft coming. And according to her, before Sputnik, it seems like there were things that were zipping around in space near Earth, which were not meteors. And I find that very interesting. So unless the government divulges everything that they know, we're probably going to have to rely on these secondary sources, like looking at astronomical plates from before Sputnik, or maybe these Peruvian mummies.
Right. And it's interesting. So how many people in the government do you think, let's just say, take the U.S. government, how many people in the U.S. government, let's say they do have aliens, how many people do you think have interacted with those bodies or vehicles?
There's a veil through which I cannot see. And it's kind of like Plato in the cave, right? There's fire, there's figures dancing on the wall, but I don't know how to make sense of it. So I'm doing the best that I can. But one of the things that I have aggressively questioned is people like Congressman Burleson, and asking them, do these whistleblowers seem to be genuinely scared that they can't say that much? And it comes back a resounding yes.
Well, even Grusch said in his testimony that he knows of people who were injured trying to reveal information.
Yeah, and the March 2024 Arrow report was really interesting because it addressed that question, but it did it in a way which I feel is dishonest. They asked the question, oh, could we find specific non-disclosure agreements that mention UFOs? And they go, oh no, we can't do that. But it's sort of like, okay, if you're hiding the biggest secret in the world, do you put that in a document that says, okay, now the biggest secret in the world that you can't reveal is X,
Right.
No. But what they did do is they say, oh, it is really common in non-disclosure agreements that the government might have you sign if you're working in a secret program, that if you reveal too much, you can be prosecuted for treason and spend the rest of your life in jail or be put to death. I'm going, oh, is that an admission that it's kind of true that if they have worked in these secret programs, that if they reveal too much, they might be prosecuted? And, when I talk to the skeptics and they go, oh, yeah, they're scared. I can't tell you if it's true, but they're scared. I can't, it's like I go back to my, my approach, which is if they don't answer your questions, you're kind of free to assume the worst.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. I mean, and by the way, it's also a point. I was once talking to a guy who was like an expert on conspiracy theories, and he had written a book like basically about what makes a conspiracy theorist. And he said one thing that makes a conspiracy theorist is at some point, maybe in their childhood or whatever, they got something happened to them that created a huge distrust of authority. And so now it's like you're saying, once they got this huge distrust of authority, whether it's from the government or even from a family structure or education, once they got that huge distrust, they basically stopped believing in everything, which is another way of saying they could be believing anything. And because they have no way to know what to trust. And so it's to your point, if the government is already showing distrust on a small level here, anything goes.
One of my favorite authors is Malcolm Gladwell, and he asked this question: how good are human beings at figuring out liars? And everybody will point to like the first person who knew that. Who is that? The Wall Street guy who stole billions from people.
Madoff?
Robert De Niro played him in the movie.
Yeah, Bernie Madoff.
Bernie Madoff, yeah. And so Malcolm Gladwell asked the question, okay, who was the first guy who knew that Madoff was a fraud? And the guy is known. And so Malcolm Gladwell went and interviewed him and found out, yeah, that guy is really good at figuring out liars, but he's also sleeping with a shotgun underneath his pillow because he thinks the SEC is coming for him. So maybe even our professional, skeptics, have a little bit of a mental problem. And so, it's one of the things that I try to do. And so, especially in this field, I kind of say, I can do a lot of research, but I'm not going to go deeper than I believe 85% of the way. Because, if you keep a good, healthy 15% of skepticism, that's probably pretty good. So, hey, do I think that aliens are probably real? Yeah, 85% I'll believe. But 15% of me is going like, okay, this could be a giant psyop, or maybe there's something about the human brain that we don't understand. And, it works really well most of the time, but maybe every 10,000 hours it has a glitch like my phone does. And, it thinks it sees ghosts, or it thinks it sees Bigfoot, or it thinks it sees aliens. And, otherwise we're working just fine. But every once in a while, some crazy stuff happens.
This is what I've been waiting for. Look, I've done 1,500 podcasts, a ton of podcasts about health and particularly anti-aging. I've had on every anti-aging expert on the planet. And finally, gummy bears to help me with anti-aging. These are the first ever longevity gummies powered by MitoPure, a delicious, easy way to put more energy into your day and to treat yourself. The only clinically proven urolithin A gummy for strength and healthy aging from the inside out. And I've taken it as supplements, but I'm not really a supplement taker kind of person. I'd much rather just like take a bunch of gummy bears and like eat it like candy. You can't really tell how much it's working, and sometimes you don't know for sure. Is it just, are you thinking this? But it does improve energy. Tests showed it increases muscle strength by up to 12% after 16 weeks. These gummy bears deliver 6x more urolithin A than a glass of pomegranate juice, which, by the way, I was taking a ton of pomegranates as well. So this is the number one doctor recommended urolithin A supplement. It's vegan, gluten-free, non-GMO, clean label project certified, NSF content certified, and free of major allergens and artificial ingredients. MitoPure is the only clinically proven form of urolithin A. So if you want to stay strong and energized now and as you age, then you have to try MitoPure gummies. My friends at Timeline are offering 20% off just for my listeners. So head to timeline.com/Altucher to get started. That's timeline.com/Altucher. Your cells will thank you.
This message comes from Capital One. The Capital One Venture X business card has no preset spending limit, so the card's purchasing power can adapt to meet business needs. Plus, the card earns unlimited double miles on every purchase, so the more a business spends, the more miles earned. And when traveling, the Venture X business card grants access to over 1,000 airport lounges. The Venture X business card, what's in your wallet? Terms and conditions apply. Find out more at CapitalOne.com/VentureXBusiness.
What can 160 years of experience teach you about the future? When it comes to protecting what matters, Pacific Life provides life insurance, retirement income, and employee benefits for people and businesses building a more confident tomorrow. Strategies rooted in strength and backed by experience. Ask a financial professional how Pacific Life can help you today. Pacific Life Insurance Company, Omaha, Nebraska, and in New York. Pacific Life and Annuity, Phoenix, Arizona.
I really honestly don't know where I stand on all of it. And your book is kind of an excellent, your book is almost like the state of the art right now as for the past 80 years of these unexplained phenomena. And it is legitimately a lot of unexplained phenomena. And we know there's been government investigations and government cover-ups. Your book is really excellent at detailing all this. And, my main skepticism really is between the time Edison made the light bulb to the time we put a man on the moon was about, 100 years. So Homo sapiens have been around, let's say, about 500,000 years. So in 500,000 years, it's only 100 years that we've been technologically astute, that we've been technologically sophisticated, or sophisticated enough to put a man on the moon. And other civilizations, the universe is 14 billion years old. So that means other civilizations, it would be, again, almost statistically impossible if they were similar to us in age. I mean, some civilizations could be technologically astute for a billion years, or even 1,000,000 years would dwarf us. We're only technologically savvy for 100 years. So maybe in 1,000 years, we're going to be transforming ourselves into particles of light and flying through black holes, and who knows what the technology is going to bring. So my main skepticism is, given that any other society that's somehow reaching us, they're probably so much older than us technologically, just by the statistics, that they probably aren't using spaceships, for instance. Like, they probably don't need to be in a ship to get to us. They don't need to be in technology that's similar to Earth technology, because they're 1,000,000,000 years more sophisticated than us. Unless there's some plateau of technology that all societies reach around the universe and don't really go beyond that, it seems unlikely that they'd be traveling to us in vehicles that look like the vehicles we use now.
Yeah, and so, I want to go back to a point you talked about going crazy and going down the rabbit hole. And this is something I'm always asking myself, like, okay, how good are my opinions? And one of the things that I feel like was most compelling in that most recent congressional hearing was the video that Congressman Burleson released of the UFO off the coast of Yemen. And it's really interesting because you kind of ask yourself, like, okay, how many crazy things would I have to believe to still be a skeptic? And so, crazy thing number one, a drone picked up an unidentified flying object and locked onto it. Okay, so that's one crazy thing. It's something that it sees that we can see on the video. Number two, another drone locks onto it and fires the Hellfire missile at it. Okay, so I've got two drones which are locked onto the same object, the Hellfire missile is now locked onto it. So I've got 3 different sensors which are seeing this craft. And then as the Hellfire missile comes close, it hits it, and the Hellfire missile doesn't explode, but it breaks up. And it's
Yeah.
weird because the pieces of it seem to orbit around whatever it was. Now, did it break up the craft? Was it the missile that broke up? I don't know. But to think that, all right, 3 different sensors, very technologically advanced, and our own eyes watching it, see something that shouldn't exist.
Yeah, no, I mean that's why this is such a fascinating subject. Like clearly there are things not being explained to us. Maybe they're, it's hard to believe that they're Earth technology because like I've seen some of these videos and like you see these, whether they're drones or UFOs or whatever, they're going like 20 times faster than the speed of sound. If you believe some of these, pilot recollections and videos. And assuming that those videos are real videos, there's something going on. But then I'm internally in conflict because of what I just said about, well, are there civilizations billions of years older than us potentially that are still using drones, as opposed to using some advanced computer involving, really advanced quantum mechanics where they're entangling their particles with us and blah, 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 and that's how they're traveling through space and time and whatever. Like, again, I'm getting into science fiction, but we don't know because every civilization that comes to us must be so far advanced. I have a hard time believing they would use technology similar to the technology we could think of. And that's really my main skepticism. Although I admit there's unexplained phenomena out there.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I thought was really interesting in David Fravor's testimony about the Tic Tacs off the coast of California that were around the USS Nimitz is he mentioned that at one point, this Tic Tac craft was 80,000 feet in altitude. And then within seconds, it was literally above the surface, a few feet above the surface of the ocean. And I'd heard somebody say, the amount of energy that it would take to do that is equal to the United States annual energy output. And I thought to myself, wow, that must be some amazing technology. So, to your point about what would it look like if an advanced civilization came to us? Well, one of the things I talk about in the book is what it was like when the Europeans came to the Americas, and the likelihood that both groups could misidentify the situation. So to the Aztecs who are seeing these men appear in ships with sails, they're thinking they're returning gods or something. That's their reality. They see gods coming there. What did the men on the ships feel like? They're saying to themselves, oh my God, I can't believe I survived that crossing. I feel I'm nearly dead. Well, those are 2 pretty different things. So those were men in those ships. And that's the question that I ask throughout this, which is, if these things are real, there's a whole story behind them. And I don't know what that is. Is it that they're just a couple hundred years more advanced than us? I mean, if you think, I'm talking to you on a cell phone, let's just go back 1,000 years. If, an early Christian on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem came across a cell phone, what would he think? I don't know. Would it be magic to him?
Yeah.
We would both be human beings. We'd, both eat and drink and want to get married and have kids or whatever, pray to God. But we'd appear completely different to each other.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And to your point also, maybe they are in just a couple hundred years, more advanced than us. Like I'm sort of making it up that would be statistically impossible, but maybe that's the only thing that's possible. Maybe there are other civilizations that are billions of years more advanced and we can't see them or have anything to do with them, but the ones we can see are the ones that also come here that are just a couple hundred years more advanced than us.
And one of the things that kind of that I differ with a lot of the UFO people with is they are convinced that these UFOs are here to help us. And I'm like, okay, maybe they're here to help us, but gosh, they really seem interested in our nuclear arsenal. The UFO people are like, well, they don't want us to destroy ourselves. And I'm like, yeah, maybe that's true. Or maybe they're kind of scared of us. Maybe if they had some bad intentions, we could put up a pretty good fight. And maybe they don't want us to put up a pretty good fight. I don't know, because so many of the UFO people are saying this whole field is being manipulated to scare people so that we spend trillions of dollars giving it to our Defense Department and our military contractors to protect us against something that is not a threat. And I don't know what's true. And it's kind of like why I say on all these questions, I feel like I'm 85-15. Yeah, I don't think the aliens are here to eat us, but might they have some practices that we would object to? Yeah, they might.
So interesting. Yeah, because you mentioned how, you talk about, the start of all this was this Trinity crash in 1945, I guess it was. And how that kind of kickstarted a lot of these government investigations and a lot of sightings, and it was all related to us potentially, detonating the first nuclear bomb. And my first question is detonating a nuclear bomb sufficient enough to raise the ire of aliens? Like, is that what they consider a technological threshold that we crossed?
Yeah, and it's interesting because all of this is like magic and science fiction because we don't know if it's real, right? But when I talk to these UFO experts and I ask that very question, I'm like, okay, one little bomb, yeah, it's nuclear, and they say, oh no, you don't understand. There's quantum entanglement, and the way these aliens are getting here is they've got these quantum wormholes, and the bombs affect the quantum wormholes. I'm like, okay, you might be talking about witches' spells for all I know, right? But at least it's an answer.
Yeah.
Like, okay, well, maybe it's like Interstellar, and you need wormholes to go from one place to another, and maybe nuclear bombs, disturb those. I don't know, but give me a story that makes sense, and then I'll try to figure out if it's true.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting. I mean, basically, your book and talking to you has raised more questions for me that I can't really come to grips with. I can't really sit back and just rely on my skepticism and my decades-long opinions on this. And that's why it's such a great read. Like, you really kind of present the story of what's happened in this entire space for the past 80 years. And there's a lot of unanswered questions that are real unanswered questions. Like, we can't just dismiss them. They're completely unanswered.
Well, it's like my publisher had said early on in this book.
He said, "You're completely insane. Get yourself committed." Oh no, I'm sorry.
No,
what did he say?
What he said, which I thought was great, is he goes, Kent, every side of this opinion sounds absurd.
Yeah.
It's absurd to believe that all these people are lying. It's also absurd to believe that aliens are zipping around our atmosphere. I'm like, yeah, I know. That's kind of what makes it fun.
Yeah. Well, look, people could read the book and decide for themselves. I'm sure this is going to be a massive bestseller. Kent Heckenlively. Is that how you say your last name? Heckenlively?
Yep. Full of heck and twice as lively.
And the book is Catastrophic Disclosure, The Deep State, Aliens, and the Truth. Let me ask you a question. I've literally been asking people since I was 11 years old. If an alien spacecraft landed on the Earth and you saw it and it came out to you, you're by yourself, it came out to you, and you could see they look like humans and whatever. They say, Kent, we came here for you. We want to take you on a 100,000-year journey around the universe. We're going to show you everything. The only thing is you have to leave with us right now. You can't say goodbye to anybody. You can't go back to your family. You have to leave right now. We're taking off. And it's going to be, we'll keep you alive. It's going to be great. It's a 100,000-year journey. Would you go?
when I came back in 100,000 years, my wife would still kill me. So no.
All right, good answer. Safe answer. You can tell me the real answer after the podcast is over. Thank you so much, Ken. I really appreciate it. Again, the title is Catastrophic Disclosure, The Deep State, Aliens, and the Truth by Kent Heckenlively.
Thanks so much, James.
This November, action is free on Pluto TV. Go on the run with Jack Reacher.
Every suspect was a train killer.
Then buckle up for Drive, World War Z.
Every human being we save is one less to fight.
And Charlie's Angels.
Damn, I hate to fly.
Launch into sci-fi adventure with The Fifth Element and laugh through the mayhem in Tropic Thunder.
What is going on here?
All the thrills, all for free. Pluto TV. Stream now. Pay never.